Okay? So an exegete is an investigator dedicated to seek the complete context of the scripture. This involves the context of the author as well as the original receptor of the text. In other words, what did the author have in mind when he wrote it? Not what the present day reader had in mind. What did the author, the original author? And then what was his purpose for the original audience, for the original receptor? What was their situation? You see, sometimes we put the horse in front of the cart in front of the horse. We put the cart in front of the horse because we want to make it apply to us so much that we forget why it was originally there. So we make our own. I mean, that's starting off on a wrong point right there. And so if you start wrong, you're not going to end right. Are you getting what I'm saying? We have to know what the original situation was. What was the cause? What was the case? Why did he have to write this? And to whom was he writing? Because the particular audiences were also crucial. Okay, we must know the idiomatic context as well as the historical, sociocultural, geographical, and personal contexts of the scriptures. So context is not only what comes before or after a particular passage, because we usually limit that to context. Isn't that right? Oh, it's out of context. But context is also history, sociology, geography, culture, etc., etc. What that situation was that he wrote. That's the context that he wrote it in. And then we go to the context. There's context of that passage, that chapter. There were no chapters in the original, and what we call the autographs, the original manuscripts. But what was the context of that? What's the context of that book? You know, what's the context of the Testament? Or what kind of letter is it? You know, so all of those consider context. And if you take it out of that context, once again, you're starting off point. Context is everything. All right? So, because we have to understand, this context gives us the situation in which the scriptures were written. This last verse, we really emphasize it in the seminary. The scriptures were not written in an existential vacuum. They were written in very real situations. Everybody with me? Okay, so I'm just going to present a couple of questions, and this is all a matter of introduction. Is it true that Moses stuttered? Yeah, we hear yes, because you hear that all the time. How many of you heard it? Just let me see the hands. Okay, this is only believed in monolinguistic cultures. When you get in cultures that are pluralistic, where you have to deal with 2, 3, or more languages, and you can go to Africa and you find little kids that have never had shoes that'll speak 4 languages. Yep. You know, and go different places. And most of the ancient world, the people were polyglots. Okay, but there's always a dominant culture that does not stoop to learn the language of the subjugated cultures. Do you realize that the United States is the second most Spanish-speaking nation on the earth? There's only one country in the entire world. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th largest Spanish-speaking cities in the world are right here in the U.S. Only one country has more Spanish-speaking people than the U.S. That's Mexico. And that has more Spanish-speaking people than any other country, any other Spanish-speaking country. But yet, how many of the people that you know just speak gringolandés? That's what I call it, English. And you know, why? Because they're the dominant culture. They won't stoop to. And even some Latins, they're ashamed of their Hispanic heritage. And I'll speak to them, ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Oh, I don't speak Spanish. You can't say, oh, I say buenos dias, and you can't say buenos dias. You can't even stoop to say that. You're Hispanic. What's the matter with you? I mean, it's like seeing a black person that's ashamed to be black. Doesn't that look sick? You see what I mean? Why? What's the matter with you? You know? So maybe you're not perfect, but you got to speak something. You got to understand something. My goodness. I learned Spanish here in the States. And now in the seminary, I'm in charge of correcting the grammar and syntax of the thesis works. And it's all Spaniards. And so, just saying. So what's Moses' thing? He spoke Hebrew when he was a child. Until he was weaned. And that could have been about 4 or 5 years old. Don't get afraid, sisters. But in some countries, that they're weaned much later in life. You know what I'm saying? And so until he was weaned. And then he's completely immersed in Egyptian. And that wasn't Arabic then, but Egyptian, completely different language. And so and he didn't have to deal with the subcultures, all the other things. So his Hebrew, by the time he's in his teens and early adulthood, his Hebrew is minimal because it was only developed to that of a child. You see what I'm saying? You remember Joseph? He was a Hebrew, but he was an Egyptian, and he was representing Pharaoh. So he had to speak to his brothers through an interpreter until he revealed himself. Remember that? Yeah. Because that's what the superior culture did. You get what I'm saying? And when I'm dealing with Latin Americans, that's in all of Latin America, I asked them, they say, yeah, in the States, yeah, they don't want to speak Spanish to us. I said, okay, in your country, let's go to Mexico. There are 500 indigenous tongues. How many of those do you speak? Well, why? They're the superior culture. They're not going to speak to an Indio. He'll have to speak Spanish to me because it's the dominant culture. You get what I'm saying? So Moses is a part of the dominant Egyptian culture. He doesn't have to learn any other languages. But his brother, he was a house slave, not a field slave. You get what I'm saying? He's a house slave. And so he's cultured. He has to be because he's dealing in the royalty's house. That's where he's raised and that's where he serves. And his sister also. And so they have to learn different languages. He have to have Egyptian. He has to have his Hebrew down, and it's high class. It's not gutter class. It's high class Hebrew. It's high class Egyptian. And he also has to greet other people, Aramaic, and the other nations that come in to visit those dignitaries. Are you following what I'm saying? Yeah. So Aaron's prepared for it. At 40 years old, Moses gets expelled from Egypt, and now he has to learn Aramaic. At 40 years old. You get what I'm saying? So he probably had some kind of a rudimentary working knowledge, but surely he spoke with an accent. Surely he didn't have good grammar, but they loved Moses. It's Moses. We get him, You get what I'm saying? And so when God calls him to go back and talk to the leaders of his people, he's got to talk to the Hebrew leadership, not the dude out there stepping on mud to make bricks. And he's got to have his Hebrew up here, but he doesn't have it up there. What are you going to come? Who are you? And he's also 40 years without speaking his Egyptian. And now his Egyptian's I tell you, how many times have I forgotten the English word right here in this? Yeah. It happens. It happens. Yeah. 40 years? Forget it. I used to speak German when I was a kid. I was raised in Germany. I get some things now, but I go when I'm in Germany, forget it. I'll just talk to them in English because my German is shot. And I'm embarrassed because that was when I was a kid. Okay? So you do lose a language if you don't use a language. Right. And so now he's got to go back. And he says, man, Lord, I've always been slow of tongue. I've never been good at languages. Because in Acts, it says that Moses was, look at this, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and mighty in words and deeds. That's not a stutterer. But he was mighty in one language. And so what? He says, your brother's coming out there. He's going to be your interpreter. That's exactly what he said. Even if he stuttered, that wouldn't have been good. You know what I mean? But he couldn't speak the language as well. So his brother was his translator. That's all that's about. Okay? Where in the Bible does it talk about 144,000 Jews? How many times have you heard, oh, and Revelation chapter 7, 144,000 from the tribe of Gad, 12,000 from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. How many of you heard that? 144,000 Jews. I've seen that in books on eschatology. I've heard preachers forever say that. And I've got to invent Velcro shirts because I ain't got money to be tearing up my shirts every time something. It's just too expensive. Tearing up my clothes every time something grieves me like that. So just get a Velcro shirt. Oh, yeah, I feel good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm good. Let's go. What that tells me is that person has a crass fundamental ignorance of the entire Old Testament. He didn't get anything. Destroyed the microphone. Hello. Yeah, there it is. Okay, he didn't get anything from the Old Testament. The Old Testament, what you got to understand is under Saul, King Saul, how many kingdoms were there? One, right? Under King David, how many kingdoms? One. Under Solomon, how many kingdoms? Under Rehoboam, how many kingdoms? Two. It divided. Kingdom of Israel in the north, kingdom of Judah in the south, right? All those tribes that went to the north, the capital city became Samaria. The south was dominated by the tribe of Judah. It was the kingdom of Judah. The north, kingdom of Israel. The capital city, Samaria. King Omri made Samaria the capital city. You with me? I keep on asking that because I don't want to leave anybody behind. Okay? The tribe of Judah was there in the south. And do you remember before that kingdom divided, there was a prophet that went up to Jeroboam and he took off his new coat and he tore it into 12 pieces. How many remember that? And he says, I'll give you 10 pieces of this cloak and one I'm going to give to the house of David. One, but he tore it into 12 pieces. Well, the reason is that one of those tribes was already going to be with the house of David. That was the tribe of Judah, because David was from the tribe of Judah, right? That was already his. And the other one was the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? So that was the two pieces. But what happened? In the north, I got another question for you. Actually, how many tribes were counted? We say 12. What about 13?
Available at Christian bookstores and online. Purchase it today.